I've been wanting to cosplay Link for years but never had the confidence to do it, so I finally decided to change that and sew my own interpretation of what I think Link would wear to a ball. The main reason I decided to cosplay Link in this way is that my sibling gifted me this beautiful jacquard fabric that they got for free from their university, and it just felt like the perfect colour and texture to make a Link cosplay out of that was a little bit more fancy and less like his normal everyday wear. But I couldn't find an official outfit that I felt really went well with this fabric, so instead I designed my own. Design-wise, I wanted to keep it very simple for three main reasons. Firstly, the main green fabric itself has a lot of detail and I didn't want to distract from that. Secondly, this cosplay involves more layering than I usually do, so I didn't want things to get too overwhelming when I put them on. And thirdly, I don't have a suit at all, so I kind of wanted this cosplay to act as a suit I could potentially wear to, say, a wedding in the future, so I didn't want it to look overtly cosplay-like. With the design finalized, I went on to making my first piece of this cosplay, which was the waistcoat. To do this, I started by tracing my work waistcoat onto some brown paper to create a pattern piece. I know this waistcoat is one that somewhat fits me because I wear it every day, so I knew it would make a good base piece that I could edit slightly to fit my style a little bit better. Using these pattern pieces, I then cut out all the green fabric I needed for this section of the project. As this is a second-hand piece of fabric, it's already cut into pieces. Most notably, it's already cut into the shape of a torso and vague arm pieces, so sometimes it was a little difficult to work with, but in terms of the waistcoat, it actually worked pretty well because I could use the last person's torso pieces to be sure I was cutting the new ones on the correct side. This fabric is different on both sides. One side the motif is shiny and the other side the background is shiny, and I decided straight away that I preferred the side where the background was shiny, so I definitely didn't want to have any pieces cut where that was on the inside. With the green pieces all cut, I then went on to cutting out my lining fabric. I decided to use a brown for this section of the cosplay because I knew I wanted armor pieces later on in brown, and I also have a lot of this fabric laying around, so it's a really good way of getting rid of old fabric instead of buying new fabric. Next, I sewed the front panels of my waistcoat together good size facing each other, flipped them the right way around, and then ironed these pieces as flat as I could. I did this so that the pieces would have a fully seamless look to them, as I noticed this is how my store-bought waistcoat was put together. It is so helpful to have a professionally made version of the thing you're trying to make right next to you so you can look at it as you go. I definitely forget sometimes that I could observe other people sewing and learn directly from it, instead of just making things up and hoping it goes okay in the end. For the next step, I wanted to backline my back panels onto my front panels. To do this, I first laid my front pieces on top of the back pieces, good size facing each other, and sewed these at the shoulders and the side seams. Then I sewed the lining of the back panel on top of the front panels. So it goes outer back good size up, front pieces good side down, and then inner back good size down. At this point, you just sew all the way around the edges of the piece to fully enclose the front and back pieces together, besides from a small hole in the side seam, but you can pull the piece back through. This is called backlining, and it's used to ensure that the finished garment has no visible seams of any sort on it. This is something that my older sister taught me how to do. She's actually really good at sewing. She has a degree in it and she works in it, so shout out to her for giving me all the cosplay tips that I need for this project. Finally, for the waistcoat, I sewed all the buttons down the front of it. I did this all off camera because I really struggle to hand sew on camera. I can't get the angles right and it just seems to mess up every time I try and do it, so I just do it off camera mostly. But I did film this process slightly later on in the video, so you will get an explanation on how I did this. With that all said, the waistcoat is finished and I really love how it came out. It's exactly how I wanted it to be. I do think I'm going to sew waist ties into the back of it at some point, just to get it a little bit tighter around my body, especially over the shirt that's underneath it. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as is and move on to my next piece of the cosplay, which is the trousers. These I kept really nice and simple with slight accents that make them look a little bit more like purchased suit trousers. Those details being sewn creases down the front of the trousers and a pointed off-center waistband, which is slightly more reminiscent of historical suit trousers. This is definitely the sort of cosplay and fashion I used to be scared of making because it's really masculine, and I've always struggled with not feeling masculine enough to wear masculine clothing. I used to always feel like wearing more stereotypically masculine clothing or cosplaying male characters would just make me look more feminine by comparison, that it would always look like drag on me and make more people misgender me, whereas when cosplaying female or gender ambiguous characters, people misgendering me doesn't bother me as much because I can deflect it by telling myself that they're speaking about the character and not me personally. It's the same with my clothing in general. I feel more comfortable being misgendered wearing more feminine clothes than I do masculine clothes, to the point where masculine clothes often make me feel really dysphoric, and because of that I've never really gotten to realise my dream of cosplaying Link or any other male character up until a few months ago where I cosplayed Toothless. If I hadn't made that cosplay, I definitely would have never made this one, not in a million years, because I didn't believe myself strong enough in my masculinity to not feel dysphoric while cosplaying a man. What I'm trying to say is that I should have just made this cosplay years ago. I reckon it would have helped me with my dysphoria, because Link is a male character that has a more curvy body type in the newer games. He's one of my favourite male characters, and I also would have got him to sew something that I could have worn to some of the events I've gone through in the past few years. So all in all, don't hold off on cosplaying any characters that you love. The whole point of cosplay is to express your love for a franchise, a character, or a person, and it doesn't matter your gender, body type, race, etc. Your love for the character is all that matters when it comes to cosplaying. Sentimental section out of the way with, I'm really happy with how these trousers came out. The only thing off about them is the back. I had to piece pieces together to get these panel pieces, and then I completely messed up on the darts multiple times. But honestly, I don't think anyone will really be looking at the back of my trousers, so it doesn't matter too much. From the front, they're pretty and they're shiny, they look like suit trousers, they go really well with the waistcoat, and that's all I wanted them to be. The next piece I created for this cosplay was the shirt. To make the patterns for these, I actually cut apart an old project that I couldn't finish because the fabric wasn't fitting very well, and used these pieces to cut out all my new fabric from a very stretchy material. I went with something really stretchy because I knew I wanted it quite form-fitting as to not look lumpy under the waistcoat or the trousers. Something that's a little different about this shirt is that I have two full panels on the front and the back. I did this so I could add that slit into the front of the shirt using a bag lining technique. Honestly, I just couldn't think of another way of doing it that wouldn't involve me sewing little pieces onto the inside of the shirt, so this is the option I went with. Firstly, I sewed the collar pieces onto both layers of the shirt and pinned them right sides together. You have to make sure that they are definitely right sides together at this point, or else you'll end up with exposed seams in the end. I then cut down the front slit and sewed all the way around the collar and down this slit in one long line of stitches. This can then be flipped around and ironed flat to get that perfectly smooth look to it. This came out really good, and I'm so happy I chose to do it this way, instead of retrospectively trying to hide all my seams. It just made the process so much quicker and easier to complete. Oh, I also did a line of top stitching over this section once it was ironed to help it stay flat a little bit better. I then followed that up with a heavy round of starching. This gives collars that nice crisp stiffness that keeps them in shape while wearing the shirt. Next, I hand sewed eyelets down that slit to add in the neck lacing. To do this, I first cut a small hole into the fabric. You want to ensure it's smaller than you intend it to be because the sewing process always tends to stretch out the hole a little bit, especially when using stretch fabrics like this one, but even on stiffer fabrics, the hole will always end up bigger than you first cut it. I then simply sew around the hole edge using a very tight blanket stitch. I find that using a blanket stitch prevents more fraying than just looping the thread around the hole, as it has that knot on the edge. For these eyelets, I went around the hole twice and then heavily ironed them into place. The thread I use is synthetic, so it melts ever so slightly under the iron, and it just holds everything together and kind of glues it into place a little bit more. With the eyelets all done, I then threaded my lacing through and cut off the excess. I originally did this with the bow at the top, but then changed it later to be at the bottom because it's easier to tie that way, and it also holds the collar piece a little bit better. Next, I needed to add on the sleeves. To do this, I first attached them at shoulder and then sewed up the bottom of them, continuing that stitch all the way down the side of the shirt as well. This is a really easy step in the process, especially with such a light and easy to work with fabric. Finally, I added in the cuffs. I made these separately at first so I could once again backline them to hide all my seams, and once they were lined, I then simply sewed them onto the bottom of my sleeves right sides together and finished them off by adding buttons and buttonholes so I could easily get my hand in and out of them. All in all, this shirt was really easy to sew because I really thought every step out before I jumped into it. It really shows that if I slow down and think about everything a little bit more, I get a result that I'm more happy with. I'm also pretty sure that if I changed out the ties in the front to white ties, I could probably wear this shirt to work and no one would notice that I made it. I do have to wear a tie at work though, so there's probably nowhere to put that unfortunately, because it's one of those clip-on ones and not a real tie, because no one can tie ties. So maybe actually it won't work. That's really annoying. I wanted it to work really badly. Next, I moved on to making my armor pieces. I decided to sew them using interfacing and elastic, as I knew I could sew these together really quickly while still getting a somewhat accurate result. All I did was cut out the pieces in the same shape as the back of my hand and my forearm, sewed the brown fabric onto either sides of them, and then sewed rings of elastic onto them so I could put them on easily. What's also great about these is that they're not distinctly part of this universe, so I could definitely use them for other cosplays such as my Toothless cosplay, or maybe a Pokemon of sorts too. They're just really great pieces to have in my cosplay stash that I can pull into different cosplays if needed. Finally, I quickly styled the wig and made the hat, both of which I didn't film a lot of. For the wig, I bought it from Amazon, and I simply retied the ponytail as it was slightly off center, and trimmed the fringe slightly with a razor. And then for the hat, I made a big ice cream cone shape, and then simply added elastic into the back of it to hold it onto my head. It always feels nice to finish off a cosplay with really quick and simple elements that really tie everything together and make the character really obvious. There's definitely nothing worse than leaving the longest section of a project to the very last. With all that said, the cosplay is actually now finished and I can finally show you the final result. I am super happy with how this turned out. I feel like it is the most professional looking cosplay I've ever made, and that's a really good thing because again, I want to use this in my everyday life, and I definitely couldn't do that if I hadn't made it specifically in this way. Like if I hadn't done all the backlining on everything, it wouldn't really be wearable because you'd have to have this done up all the time, and that's just not practical in everyday use. I do, however, think a lot of the charm of this cosplay is definitely down to this fabric choice. Like it is so beautiful and adds so much detail without me even needing to try and add any. So that really makes me think that I should use more interesting fabrics in my cosplays in the future. I did it for Toothless a bit. I had that really nice pattern fabric underneath, but then I still use quite a plain fabric for the trousers. So this really shows me that I don't really like plain fabrics all as much as I thought I did. And there are definitely ways of adding texture without adding hours and hours of work into a project. But yeah, that is it for this video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like down below. Comment what else you'd like me to do, maybe some other characters you'd like to see me cosplay, and subscribe as I post a new video every single week, and I'd love to see you again. But until then, bye.
Get back to talking about my outfit.
Nobody was talking about that.
Which is why I'm trying to get that ball rolling. So how does it look? It's good, right?